October 2014. The first frost of the season clung to the windows of St. Margaret's Academy, casting crystalline patterns across the Gothic architecture that had stood sentinel over the small town of Millbrook for nearly a century. At precisely 6:47 a.m., 3 unmarked sedans pulled into the circular driveway where yellow school buses typically gathered. Detective Sarah Morrison was reviewing her morning coffee when her radio crackled with a priority dispatch that would unravel decades of carefully buried secrets. What began as a routine follow-up on a cold case had transformed into an explosive revelation that would shake the very foundations of this tight-knit Catholic community. The morning mist seemed to carry whispers of long-forgotten prayers as investigators approached the ivy-covered entrance where 15-year-old students had once walked with backpacks heavy with textbooks and dreams. Now, 28 years after a tragedy that had been quietly swept under ornate sanctuary carpets, the truth was finally demanding its day in court. The sound of car doors slamming echoed against stone walls that had witnessed both salvation and sin, while somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed the hour with an almost mocking innocence. If you're interested in true crime cases that expose the details mainstream media often overlooks, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, because today's story contains revelations that will challenge everything you thought you knew about institutional protection, and the lengths some will go to preserve their reputation. Maria Isabella Santos entered this world on a humid July morning in 1969, born to Miguel and Carmen Santos in the cramped maternity ward of Millbrook General Hospital. Standing 5 feet 8 inches tall with shoulder-length black hair that caught sunlight like silk, Maria possessed striking amber eyes that her mother always said could see straight into people's souls. Her lean, athletic build came from years of track and field, where she held the school record for the 800-meter dash, while a small scar above her left eyebrow served as a permanent reminder of a childhood accident involving her older brother's bicycle. Miguel Santos worked double shifts at the local textile mill, his calloused hands providing for a family that had immigrated from El Salvador when Maria was just 3 years old. Carmen cleaned houses for wealthy families on the hill, her broken English never hindering her ability to provide spotless homes and warm meals for her 3 children. Maria was the middle child, sandwiched between 17-year-old Roberto, who dreamed of joining the military, and 12-year-old Sofia, who followed Maria everywhere with wide-eyed admiration. Maria always asked the difficult questions, her mother Carmen would later recall, tears streaming down weathered cheeks during a 1985 interview with local investigators. Even as a small child, she wanted to know why things were the way they were, why some people had more than others, why adults sometimes said one thing but did another. Her best friend since elementary school, Jennifer Walsh, remembered Maria's unwavering sense of justice. She couldn't stand bullies or liars. If she saw someone being treated unfairly, she'd speak up, even when it got her in trouble. Maria's dreams extended far beyond Millbrook's town limits. She had been accepted to 3 universities with partial scholarships, her exceptional grades in honors classes, making her a standout student despite her family's modest means. Her guidance counselor, Mrs. Peterson, had written in her recommendation letter that Maria possessed an intellectual curiosity and moral courage that distinguished her from her peers. She tutored younger students after school, saving every dollar for college expenses while maintaining a 3.8 GPA, and participating in the school newspaper as an investigative reporter. The Santos family lived in a 2-bedroom apartment above Moretti's Bakery on Elm Street, where the aroma of fresh bread provided a comforting backdrop to their evening conversations around a kitchen table that Miguel had built himself. Maria's bedroom, shared with Sofia, was decorated with college brochures, track medals, and a crucifix that had belonged to her grandmother in El Salvador. Her daily routine included 5:30 a.m. runs through Millbrook Park, followed by Mass at St. Joseph's before school, then afternoon tutoring sessions that often stretched until the library's closing time. Millbrook in 1984 was a community of approximately 12,000 residents nestled in the rolling hills of central Massachusetts, where 3 generations often lived within walking distance of each other, and Sunday Mass was as much a social gathering as a religious obligation. The town's economic backbone rested on the textile mill that employed nearly a third of the adult population, while Main Street featured family-owned businesses that had survived the Depression and 2 world wars through sheer determination and community loyalty. The Reagan administration's economic policies had created a cautious optimism among Millbrook's working-class families, though the Santos household still counted every penny and shopped for clothes at the annual church rummage sale. MTV was changing teenage culture across America, but in Millbrook, Friday night football games and Saturday evening socials at the Parish Hall remained the primary social venues for young people. The crack cocaine epidemic that was devastating urban areas felt distant from these tree-lined streets where children still rode bicycles without helmets and neighbors left their doors unlocked. St. Margaret's Academy dominated the town's skyline with its bell tower visible from every neighborhood, serving as both educational institution and moral compass for families who sacrificed financially to provide their children with Catholic education. The school's reputation for academic excellence and strict discipline attracted students from surrounding towns, while its faculty of nuns and lay teachers commanded respect throughout the region. Father Thomas Mackenzie had served as the school's chaplain for 15 years, his weekly religion classes and daily mass attendance making him a familiar figure to every student who walked those hallowed halls. The autumn of 1984 had brought an unusually early winter to New England, with November temperatures dropping below freezing and the first significant snowfall arriving weeks ahead of schedule. This harsh weather seemed to mirror the underlying tensions within St. Margaret's Academy, where budget cuts had eliminated several programs and increased class sizes, creating stress among faculty members who prided themselves on individual attention to students. March 15th, 1985 began as an ordinary Friday for Maria Santos, though the events that would unfold over the next 14 hours would forever alter the trajectory of countless lives and expose secrets that powerful individuals had worked desperately to conceal. 6:15 a.m. Maria completed her usual morning run through Millbrook Park, her breath forming small clouds in the crisp air as she maintained her steady pace past the gazebo, where summer concerts filled warm evenings with community spirit. Mrs. Henderson, walking her elderly collie, later testified that Maria appeared focused and determined, like she always did, but maybe carrying some kind of weight on her shoulders. 7:00 a.m. The Santos family gathered around their small kitchen table for breakfast, where Carmen had prepared scrambled eggs and toast, while Miguel read from yesterday's newspaper, a habit he maintained to improve his English comprehension. Sophia remembered that Maria seemed quieter than usual and kept checking her watch, though she ate her entire breakfast and helped clear the dishes before gathering her school books. 7:30 a.m. Maria attended morning mass at St. Joseph's Church, sitting in her customary spot 3 rows from the altar on the left side, where she could clearly see Father Mackenzie's face during his homily about moral courage and speaking truth to power. Fellow parishioner Mrs. Rosa Martinez observed that Maria seemed to be really listening, nodding along like the words meant something special to her that day. 8:15 a.m. Arrival at St. Margaret's Academy, where Maria stopped at her locker to retrieve books for her first period advanced English class, taught by Sister Catherine O'Brien, who had encouraged Maria's writing talents and helped her develop the investigative skills she used for the school newspaper. Several classmates noted that Maria carried a manila folder that appeared thicker than usual. 10:30 a.m. During second period study hall, Maria approached her journalism advisor, Mr. David Sullivan, requesting a private conference that afternoon to discuss an important story that could affect the entire school community. Sullivan later recalled being struck by Maria's serious demeanor and her insistence that their meeting remain confidential until she could present all the evidence properly. 12:00 p.m. Lunch period found Maria sitting with her usual group of friends in the cafeteria, though witnesses remembered her contributing little to the conversation and frequently glancing toward the table where faculty members typically ate their meals. Her untouched turkey sandwich remained wrapped in wax paper, and she declined Jennifer's offer to share her homemade chocolate chip cookies. 1:45 p.m. During fifth period biology class, taught by Mrs. Eleanor Hutchins, Maria asked to be excused to visit the nurse's office, complaining of a severe headache that had been building throughout the day. The school nurse, Mrs. Patricia Donovan, later stated that Maria's vital signs appeared normal, but she seemed agitated and kept asking about confidentiality policies regarding student conversations. 3:20 p.m. The final school bell rang, and Maria was observed walking toward the faculty wing rather than joining the stream of students heading toward the parking lot and bus pickup area. Security guard Robert Chen noted in his log that Maria entered the building's administrative section at approximately 3:25 p.m., carrying what appeared to be a large envelope or folder. 4:15 p.m. Maria's scheduled meeting with Mr. Sullivan was set to begin in his classroom on the second floor, room 247, where afternoon sunlight typically streamed through tall windows that offered a view of the school's memorial garden. However, Maria never appeared for this crucial appointment that she had insisted was urgently important. 6:30 p.m. Carmen Santos called St. Margaret's Academy when Maria failed to return home at her usual time, reaching the night janitor, who confirmed that the building appeared empty except for maintenance staff. A quick search of Maria's usual haunts, including the library and computer lab, yielded no sign of the missing teenager. 8:45 p.m. Miguel Santos contacted the Millbrook Police Department to file a missing person report, though the desk sergeant initially suggested waiting until morning, as 15-year-olds sometimes stayed out late with friends. The Santos family's increasing panic, combined with Maria's reputation as a responsible student, who always called home when plans changed, convinced Officer Patricia Williams to begin preliminary inquiries that evening. The discovery that would haunt Millbrook for decades came at dawn on Saturday, March 16th, when groundskeeper Timothy Walsh arrived at St. Margaret's Academy to prepare the athletic fields for the upcoming spring sports season. At precisely 6:43 a.m., Walsh's routine inspection of the maintenance shed behind the gymnasium revealed a scene that would be seared into his memory for the remainder of his 78 years of life. Maria Santos lay motionless among gardening tools and athletic equipment, her school uniform neatly arranged, but her amber eyes staring sightlessly toward a small window that faced the morning sunrise. The Millbrook Police Department's crime scene unit, consisting of Detective Lieutenant Robert Hayes and 2 junior officers, arrived within 23 minutes of Walsh's frantic 911 call. The maintenance shed, measuring approximately 12 by 15 feet, contained several pieces of evidence that would prove crucial to the investigation. Maria's leather book bag, positioned near the door as if dropped suddenly, a manila folder containing photocopied documents scattered across the concrete floor, a broken rosary with distinctive silver beads that belonged to Maria, traces of what appeared to be a struggle near workbenches along the north wall, and most significantly, a handwritten note in Maria's careful script that simply read, "Father Mackenzie knows the truth about the money." The medical examiner, Dr. Harold Winston, determined that Maria had died from blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with falling or being pushed against the shed's concrete foundation. Time of death was estimated between 4:00 and 6:00 p.m. on Friday, March 15th, placing the tragedy during the time period when Maria should have been meeting with Mr. Sullivan to discuss her urgent story. No evidence of sexual assault was discovered, though Dr. Winston noted defensive wounds on Maria's hands and arms, suggesting she had fought desperately against her attacker. The photocopied documents found scattered around Maria's body revealed a complex financial scheme involving St. Margaret's Academy's building fund, which had collected over $200 Urundal dollars from parishioners and community members for desperately needed renovations to the school's aging infrastructure. Maria's meticulous research, compiled over several weeks of after-school investigation, had uncovered discrepancies between deposited amounts and actual expenditures, with approximately $45 Iwanzan dollars apparently diverted to accounts that Maria had been unable to fully trace before her death. Father Thomas Mackenzie, reached at the parish rectory by Detective Hayes that Saturday morning, expressed shock and grief at Maria's death, while denying any knowledge of financial irregularities within the school's administration. "Maria was a wonderful student and a faithful Catholic," Mackenzie stated during his initial interview. "If she had concerns about anything, I wish she had come to me directly instead of conducting some kind of amateur investigation that may have put her in danger." Have you ever lived in a small town where everyone knows everyone else's business, yet somehow the most important secrets remain hidden for decades? The investigation into Maria's death would reveal just how much darkness can flourish behind facades of respectability and religious devotion. The initial investigation into Maria Santos's death revealed the limitations of small-town law enforcement when confronted with a case that threatened to expose corruption within the community's most respected institutions. Detective Lieutenant Robert Hayes, a 22-year veteran of the Millbrook Police Department, had previously handled domestic disputes, petty theft, and occasional drug possession cases, but nothing approaching the complexity of a potential murder involving ecclesiastical finances and institutional cover-ups. The technological resources available to Hayes in 1985 consisted primarily of fingerprint analysis, basic photography, and witness interviews, as DNA testing remained expensive and time-consuming for departments with limited budgets. The Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab could process fingerprints within 2 weeks under ideal circumstances, though the backlog often extended that timeline significantly. Ballistics analysis was irrelevant in Maria's case, but the absence of advanced forensic techniques meant that crucial evidence may have been overlooked or inadequately preserved. Hayes identified 5 primary suspects during the first month of investigation, each with apparent motive and opportunity to harm Maria Santos. Father Thomas Mackenzie, age 42, had served as St. Margaret's chaplain since 1970 and maintained administrative oversight of the building fund that Maria had been investigating. Mackenzie's alibi placed him at a diocesan meeting in Springfield from 2:00 to 8:02 p.m. on March 15th, confirmed by Bishop Francis Murphy and 3 other clergy members, though the drive time between cities allowed for a potential window of opportunity. Vincent Romano, age 38, served as St. Margaret's business manager and had direct access to all financial records that might have revealed the accounting discrepancies Maria discovered. Romano had been employed by the school for 12 years, during which time he had earned a reputation for meticulous attention to detail and unwavering loyalty to the institution. His alibi consisted of being home with his wife and 2 young children from 3:30 p.m. onward, though Mrs. Romano later admitted she had been napping and could not account for her husband's whereabouts with complete certainty. David Sullivan, age 29, Maria's journalism advisor who had scheduled the meeting she never attended, became a person of interest when investigators learned that he had been romantically involved with a former student who had graduated 2 years earlier. Sullivan claimed to have waited in his classroom until 5:00 p.m. before leaving campus, but no witnesses could confirm his presence during the crucial time period between 4:00 and 6:00 p.m. when Maria's death occurred. School maintenance supervisor Carl Henderson, age 54, possessed keys to every building on campus, including the shed where Maria's body was discovered. Henderson had been disciplined twice in recent months for alcohol-related issues and had expressed resentment towards students he perceived as privileged or entitled. His defensive attitude during initial questioning raised suspicions, though his wife confirmed he had arrived home at his usual time around 4:30 p.m. on March 15th. The 5th suspect emerged when investigators learned that Maria had been tutoring Thomas Brennan Jr., the 17-year-old son of prominent local attorney Thomas Brennan Sr., who had been facing academic probation that would prevent his acceptance to prestigious universities. Young Brennan had reportedly made inappropriate advances toward Maria during tutoring sessions, advances that she had firmly rejected while threatening to report his behavior to school administrators. Brennan's alibi relied on teammates from the basketball team who claimed he had been at practice until 5:30 p.m., though the coach could not definitively confirm his presence throughout the entire session. Each suspect was eventually eliminated through a combination of verified alibis, lack of physical evidence, and the absence of clear motive strong enough to justify murder. Father Mackenzie's diocesan meeting was confirmed through multiple independent sources, while Vincent Romano's financial records revealed no personal benefit from the missing building fund money. David Sullivan's inappropriate relationship, while professionally concerning, had occurred with a consenting adult and bore no connection to Maria's investigation. Carl Henderson's alcohol problems and general surliness did not translate into evidence of violent behavior, and his wife's testimony, while not ironclad, was supported by neighbors who observed him arriving home at his usual time. Thomas Brennan Jr.'s uncomfortable advances toward Maria, while inappropriate, were characterized by witnesses as awkward teenage behavior rather than aggressive harassment, and his basketball teammates provided consistent accounts of his presence at practice. The investigation stalled by summer 1985 as Detective Hayes exhausted his list of suspects while failing to develop new leads that might identify Maria's killer. The missing 45 $100 from the building fund was quietly restored through anonymous donations arranged by the diocese, effectively eliminating the financial motive that had driven Maria's investigation. The scattered documents found at the crime scene disappeared from the evidence locker under circumstances that were never adequately explained, though Hayes suspected that political pressure from influential community members had influenced the handling of potentially explosive evidence. The case was officially classified as inactive in December 1985, though Hayes continued to revisit the file periodically throughout his remaining years of service, before retiring in 1993. The detective's final report noted that Maria Santos had uncovered evidence of financial irregularities that threatened individuals or institutions with significant community standing, but acknowledged that, despite extensive investigation, no definitive suspect has been identified, and physical evidence has proven insufficient to support prosecution of any individual connected to this case. The last significant investigative activity occurred in early 1986 when the Massachusetts Attorney General's office conducted a brief review of the case at the request of Maria's family, who had grown increasingly frustrated with what they perceived as a lack of urgency from local authorities. However, this review concluded that Millbrook Police had conducted a thorough investigation within the constraints of available resources and evidence, effectively closing any possibility of state-level intervention in the case. It's interesting to consider how many unsolved cases from decades past might be cracked open if we had access to today's technology back then. What time is it where you're watching this, and have you ever wondered about the cold cases in your own community? The Santos family's world collapsed entirely in the weeks following Maria's death, as each member struggled to process not only their devastating loss, but also the growing realization that justice might never be served. Miguel Santos, who had worked double shifts at the textile mill to provide his family with opportunities he had never enjoyed, found himself unable to concentrate on even simple tasks, his supervisor eventually arranging extended leave when Miguel's grief began creating safety hazards around dangerous machinery. Carmen Santos transformed her anguish into relentless advocacy, spending countless hours at the police station demanding updates on the investigation, while simultaneously organizing prayer vigils and community meetings designed to keep Maria's case in the public consciousness. "My daughter died because she was trying to do the right thing," Carmen declared during a tearful appearance at a town selectmen's meeting in April 1985. She believed that truth mattered more than protecting powerful people, and someone killed her for that belief. "I will not let her death be forgotten or swept under the rug like it never happened." Roberto Santos, Maria's older brother, who had been preparing for military enlistment, postponed his plans indefinitely to remain home and support his family during their darkest period. The young man who had once shared dreams of serving his country found himself consumed with rage and frustration, often spending hours walking through Millbrook streets late at night, searching for any clue or witness that might have been overlooked by official investigators. Roberto's grief manifested in increasingly confrontational behavior toward individuals he suspected of involvement in his sister's death, leading to several incidents that required police intervention and ultimately convinced him to seek counseling through the church. 12-year-old Sofia Santos, who had idolized her older sister and dreamed of following in Maria's academic footsteps, retreated into herself following the tragedy. her grades plummeting as she struggled with survivors' guilt and terror that Maria's killer might target other family members. Sophia began experiencing nightmares and panic attacks that persisted for years, requiring extensive therapy and medication that the family could barely afford on Miguel's reduced income. The financial impact of Maria's death extended far beyond funeral expenses, as the Santos family found themselves unable to maintain their apartment above Moretti's bakery when Miguel's extended absence from work eliminated crucial overtime pay that had supplemented their basic household budget. Carmen was forced to take additional cleaning jobs while simultaneously caring for Sophia and managing the emotional needs of her husband and surviving son, a burden that took a visible toll on her physical health and emotional well-being. In the months following Maria's death, the Santos family established a scholarship fund in her memory, initially funded through small donations from community members who had been touched by the teenager's dedication to justice and academic excellence. Carmen personally solicited contributions by going door to door throughout Millbrook, sharing stories about Maria's dreams and accomplishments, while asking neighbors to help ensure that other deserving students might have opportunities that Maria would never experience. The scholarship fund became Carmen's primary focus as years passed without resolution in Maria's case, providing her with a constructive outlet for grief while honoring her daughter's memory in a tangible way that could benefit future generations of students. Each year, on March 15th, the anniversary of Maria's death, the Santos family organized a memorial mass, followed by a reception, where scholarship recipients shared their academic achievements and future plans, creating a bittersweet celebration of educational opportunity emerging from tragic loss. Roberto eventually enlisted in the army in 1987, serving 2 tours of duty overseas before returning to Millbrook with combat-related PTSD that compounded his existing trauma from Maria's unsolved murder. His military service provided structure and purpose during young adulthood, though he struggled with civilian life upon discharge and required ongoing counseling to address both his war experiences and his unresolved grief over his sister's death. Sophia's academic performance never fully recovered from the trauma of losing Maria, though she eventually graduated from high school and found work as a medical technician at Millbrook General Hospital, the same facility where Maria had been born 15 years earlier. Sophia never married or had children, later explaining in interviews that Maria's death had convinced her that the world was too dangerous and unpredictable to bring new life into existence. Miguel Santos died of a heart attack in 1998 at age 54, with family members convinced that years of stress and grief had contributed to his premature death. Carmen continued living alone in a small apartment near the hospital where Sophia worked, maintaining the scholarship fund and attending daily mass, while never abandoning hope that Maria's killer would eventually be identified and prosecuted. The extended Santos family, including aunts, uncles, and cousins who had immigrated from El Salvador during the 1980s, rallied around Miguel and Carmen during the immediate aftermath of Maria's death, providing both emotional support and financial assistance that helped the family survive their darkest period. However, the unsolved nature of Maria's case created ongoing tension within the broader family structure, as some relatives urged the Santos family to accept Maria's death as God's will, while others supported Carmen's continued advocacy for justice. Maria's death fundamentally altered the Santos family's relationship with their faith and their church, as they struggled to reconcile their belief in divine justice with the apparent triumph of evil in their daughter's case. While they continued attending Mass and participating in church activities, their trust in religious authority figures had been permanently damaged by suspicions that institutional interests had taken precedence over truth-seeking in Maria's investigation. Between 1986 and 2010, Maria's case was officially reviewed 4 separate times as new police chiefs took office and promised fresh perspectives on cold cases that had frustrated their predecessors. Each review followed a similar pattern: renewed hope from the Santos family, temporary media attention, re-examination of existing evidence, interviews with surviving witnesses, and ultimately disappointing conclusions that no new information had been uncovered to justify reopening active investigation. The first major review occurred in 1991 under Police Chief Jonathan Martinez, who had been hired partly based on his promises to prioritize cold cases using improved investigative techniques. Martinez authorized the testing of physical evidence using newly available DNA analysis, though the samples collected from Maria's clothing and the crime scene proved too degraded or contaminated to yield useful genetic profiles. A second comprehensive review in 1998 coincided with the 10th anniversary of Maria's death and increasing pressure from community members who felt that justice had been denied for too long. Detective Sergeant Linda Kowalski, who had recently completed specialized training in cold case investigation, spent 6 months re-interviewing witnesses and examining evidence with fresh eyes, ultimately concluding that the original investigation had been thorough within the limitations of 1985 technology and resources. The third review in 2005 was prompted by advances in computer databases that allowed for comparison of Maria's case with similar crimes committed throughout New England during the 1980s. This analysis revealed several cases involving financial corruption and suspicious deaths, though none demonstrated sufficient similarity to suggest a connection with Maria's murder. The most extensive review began in 2010 when newly elected District Attorney Patricia Chen made cold cases a centerpiece of her administration's law enforcement strategy. Chen authorized a full reinvestigation of Maria's death using cutting-edge forensic techniques, including advanced DNA analysis, digital enhancement of crime scene photographs, and psychological profiling based on behavioral evidence from the original case files. This 2010 review generated the most hope the Santos family had experienced in 25 years, as investigators discovered previously unanalyzed evidence that had been stored in the basement of the old courthouse and forgotten during a building renovation project in the mid-1990s. Among these items were several photographs of the crime scene that had never been properly processed, including images that showed footprints and other trace evidence that had been overlooked in the original investigation. However, even this most promising review ultimately concluded without identifying Maria's killer, though investigators acknowledged that significant new evidence had been uncovered that might prove valuable if additional information emerged in the future. District Attorney Chen's final report noted that substantial progress has been made in understanding the circumstances surrounding Maria Santos's death, and this case remains a high priority for our office as we continue developing new investigative leads. The technological evolution that occurred between Maria's death in 1985 and these subsequent reviews dramatically illustrated the rapid advancement of forensic science during the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Techniques that were science fiction in 1985, including DNA analysis, computer-assisted image enhancement, and national criminal databases, became routine investigative tools that revolutionized cold case work throughout the United States. Despite these technological advances, Maria's case continued to resist solution, suggesting that her killer had either died, moved away from the area, or possessed sufficient knowledge of investigative techniques to avoid leaving traceable evidence. The possibility that Maria's death had been orchestrated by individuals with access to law enforcement information remained a persistent theory among some investigators, though no concrete evidence ever supported such speculation. February 2016. The morning frost clung to the windows of Sacred Heart Catholic Academy as police vehicles converged on the modest brick building that had stood as a pillar of faith in the community for over 60 years. Detective Maria Santos was reviewing case files in her unmarked sedan when dispatch crackled through her radio with coordinates that would forever change how she viewed small-town secrets. What began as a routine follow-up interview regarding decades-old allegations suddenly exploded into a revelation that would unearth one of the most disturbing cover-ups in the parish's history. The body of 15-year-old Catherine Marie Hoffman, missing for 23 years, had finally been found beneath the school's foundation during routine renovation work. If you're interested in true crime cases that reveal the dark secrets institutions work desperately to hide, hit that like button and subscribe for the details mainstream media won't touch. Catherine Marie Hoffman was born on September 14, 1977, to Robert and Ellen Hoffman in the tight-knit community of St. Augustine, Ohio. Standing 5 feet 8 inches tall with striking long black hair and piercing green eyes, Catherine possessed an athletic build from years of competitive swimming and basketball. Her olive complexion and distinctive dimpled smile made her easily recognizable throughout the small town of just over 3,000 residents. Robert worked as a foreman at the local manufacturing plant, while Ellen taught second grade at the public elementary school across town from Sacred Heart Academy. Catherine's younger brother Michael, then 12, described his sister as fiercely protective and academically gifted. Catherine never backed down from what she believed was right, Ellen Hoffman recalled during a 1993 interview. She had this way of seeing through people's facades that sometimes made adults uncomfortable. The teenager's best friend, Jennifer Walsh, remembered Catherine's aspirations to become an investigative journalist. She was always asking questions others wouldn't dare ask, especially about things happening at school that didn't seem right. The Hoffman family represented middle-class stability in their community. Robert's steady income and Ellen's teaching salary afforded them a comfortable ranch home on Maple Street, complete with the above-ground pool where Catherine spent countless summer hours perfecting her swimming technique. Catherine's daily routine included early morning swim practice, advanced placement classes, and after-school tutoring for younger students struggling with mathematics and science. St. Augustine in 1993 existed as a microcosm of American small-town life, where everyone knew their neighbors and Sunday mass attendance served as a weekly community gathering. The town's economy centered around 3 main employers: Hoffman Manufacturing, where Catherine's father worked, the regional hospital, and the school district. Sacred Heart Catholic Academy educated approximately 400 students from kindergarten through 12th grade, serving families from St. Augustine and surrounding rural areas. The early 1990s brought economic uncertainty to many Midwestern communities, and St. Augustine faced its share of challenges. Plant layoffs created tension among families, while debates over school funding dominated town hall meetings. Despite these pressures, the community maintained its reputation for safety and moral stability, largely anchored by the influence of Sacred Heart Academy and its long-serving faculty. The school building itself, constructed in 1952, featured traditional red brick architecture with tall windows and a bell tower that chimed every hour. Students walked familiar hallways lined with religious artwork and photographs of graduating classes dating back 4 decades. The basement housed the cafeteria, storage rooms, and maintenance areas that few students ever visited. March 15, 1993, began like any typical Monday for Catherine Hoffman. Her alarm sounded at 5:30 a.m. for morning swim practice at the school pool. Ellen Hoffman kissed her daughter goodbye at 6:15 a.m. as Catherine grabbed her backpack and swimming bag. "See you tonight, Mom. Don't wait up if practice runs late," were Catherine's last words to her mother. 6:45 a.m. Catherine arrived at Sacred Heart Academy for swimming practice. Coach Patricia Mills noted Catherine's attendance and observed her completing warm-up laps. 7:30 a.m. Practice concluded, and Catherine showered in the girls' locker room. 3 teammates saw her gathering her belongings and discussing weekend homework assignments. 8:15 a.m. Catherine attended first period advanced biology with Sister Margaret O'Brien. Classmate David Chen remembered Catherine asking detailed questions about cellular reproduction. 9:10 a.m. During American history class, teacher Mr. Frank Kowalski assigned research projects on local historical figures. Catherine chose to investigate the founding of Sacred Heart Academy. 11:45 a.m. Catherine ate lunch in the cafeteria with Jennifer Walsh and Maria Rodriguez. She seemed excited about something, Maria later told investigators. Catherine mentioned discovering interesting information in old school records she'd been reviewing for her history project. 1:20 p.m. During study hall, librarian Mrs. Dorothy Evans saw Catherine examining archived school documents in the basement research room. 3:15 p.m. Final bell rang, but Catherine did not board her usual bus home. 3:45 p.m. Catherine was seen entering the school's administrative wing apparently heading toward Father Thomas McKenna's office. 4:30 p.m. The final documented sighting placed Catherine leaving the administrative area carrying a manila folder. Night custodian Ralph Morrison glimpsed her near the basement stairs, but thought nothing unusual of students staying late for various activities. Ellen Hoffman began worrying when Catherine failed to arrive home by 6:00 p.m. for family dinner. Phone calls to friends yielded no information about Catherine's whereabouts. By 8:00 p.m., Robert Hoffman drove to Sacred Heart Academy, finding the building locked and Catherine's bicycle still secured in the bike rack. The family contacted police at 9:30 p.m., initiating a missing person investigation that would consume the next 2 decades. The discovery of Catherine's remains occurred during winter renovation work in February 2016. Construction worker Tommy Valdez was operating a jackhammer to remove old concrete flooring in the basement when his equipment struck something unusual. "I thought it was an old water pipe at first," Valdez later testified. "But when I cleared away more concrete, I could see fabric and what looked like bones." The medical examiner's team carefully excavated the makeshift grave, uncovering Catherine's skeletal remains, along with several personal items that confirmed her identity. Catherine's class ring, engraved with her initials and graduation year 1995, remained on her finger. Her distinctive silver cross necklace, a gift from her grandmother, lay tangled around cervical vertebrae. Forensic anthropologist Dr. Sarah Chen determined that Catherine had suffered blunt force trauma to the skull, consistent with being struck by a heavy object. Additional evidence recovered from the gravesite included fragments of the manila folder Catherine had been carrying, though most documents had deteriorated beyond recognition. However, investigators found partially preserved photocopies of financial records and what appeared to be correspondence between school administrators and diocesan officials. The concrete used to seal Catherine's grave showed signs of hasty application, with air bubbles and uneven surfaces, suggesting someone had worked quickly to conceal the crime. Perhaps most disturbing was the discovery of other items buried alongside Catherine's body: a priest's ceremonial ring belonging to Father McKenna and a ledger book containing handwritten entries detailing financial discrepancies in school accounts. The condition of Catherine's remains and surrounding evidence painted a picture of a murder committed in desperation and covered up with institutional complicity. Have you ever wondered what secrets might be hidden in the institutions that shaped your own childhood? Share your thoughts in the comments about the trust we place in those who guide our communities. The St. Augustine Police Department in 1993 consisted of Chief William Patterson and 4 patrol officers serving the small community. Limited resources and investigative experience hampered the initial search for Catherine. Chief Patterson, a 30-year veteran who had never handled a missing person case involving potential foul play, relied heavily on state police assistance and FBI consultation. Technological limitations of the early 1990s meant no cell phone tracking, limited surveillance cameras, and forensic techniques that seemed primitive by today's standards. DNA analysis existed but remained expensive and time-consuming, reserved for cases with substantial physical evidence. The investigation team had to rely on witness interviews, physical searches, and traditional detective work. The first suspect was Catherine's ex-boyfriend, James Mitchell, 17, who had dated Catherine briefly the previous summer. Their relationship ended poorly when Catherine discovered James had been seeing another girl simultaneously. James worked part-time at his father's auto repair shop and had access to tools that could potentially cause harm. However, multiple witnesses confirmed James was working at the shop until 7:00 p.m. on March 15th, providing a solid alibi that eliminated him from consideration. Ralph Morrison, the school custodian, became the second focus of investigation. Morrison, 43, had worked at Sacred Heart Academy for 15 years and possessed keys to every room in the building. Some students reported feeling uncomfortable around Morrison, who occasionally made inappropriate comments about female students' appearances. Investigators discovered Morrison had been convicted of public intoxication and disorderly conduct in 1987, but found no evidence connecting him to Catherine's disappearance. Morrison's wife confirmed he arrived home at his usual time on March 15th, and spent the evening watching television with her. Father Thomas McKenna represented the most complex suspect profile. McKenna, 51, had served as Sacred Heart Academy's principal and parish priest for 12 years. Respected throughout the community for his dedication to education and spiritual guidance, McKenna had no apparent motive for harming Catherine. However, the manila folder Catherine carried on her last day contained documents related to her history project investigation. Some community members wondered if Catherine had uncovered information that somehow threatened McKenna's position or reputation. Catherine's history teacher, Frank Kowalski, became the fourth suspect when investigators learned of his sometimes volatile relationship with challenging students. Kowalski, 38, had taught at Sacred Heart Academy for 8 years and was known for his demanding academic standards. Several students reported that Kowalski became angry when Catherine questioned his teaching methods or challenged his interpretation of historical events. Nevertheless, multiple colleagues confirmed Kowalski remained in faculty meetings until 5:30 p.m. on March 15th, making his involvement unlikely. The final suspect was Dr. Richard Cartwright, the school's part-time counselor who met with students experiencing academic or personal difficulties. Cartwright, 47, maintained a private practice in addition to his school responsibilities and had counseled Catherine regarding college preparation and career planning. Some parents expressed concerns about Cartwright's unconventional therapy methods, but no concrete evidence linked him to Catherine's disappearance. Cartwright's appointment calendar showed him meeting with other students until 4:00 p.m., after which he claimed to have driven directly home to his family. By summer 1993, the investigation had reached an impasse. State police exhausted their leads. Witness interviews yielded no new information, and physical evidence remained virtually non-existent. The case was officially classified as inactive in December 1993, though Chief Patterson insisted it would never be closed permanently. As I record this video, it's likely evening where many of you are watching. Time moves differently for families waiting for answers, where every sunset represents another day without closure. The Hoffman family's life fractured irreparably after Catherine's disappearance. Ellen Hoffman, unable to continue teaching while consumed by grief and uncertainty, took extended leave that eventually became permanent disability retirement. "Every child I saw in my classroom reminded me of Catherine," Ellen explained in a 1995 interview. "I kept wondering if some other family was going through what we were experiencing." Robert Hoffman channeled his anguish into action, becoming a relentless advocate for missing children and families. He learned to navigate police bureaucracy, understanding legal procedures and evidence requirements that might help locate his daughter. Robert established the Catherine Hoffman Foundation in 1995, providing resources and support for other families dealing with missing children cases. "I promised myself that no other family would face this nightmare alone," Robert stated during the foundation's inaugural fundraising dinner. Michael Hoffman, Catherine's younger brother, struggled academically and socially throughout his teenage years. The constant uncertainty about his sister's fate created persistent anxiety that affected his relationships and career aspirations. Michael eventually became a social worker, specializing in crisis intervention for families dealing with trauma. "Catherine taught me to protect people who can't protect themselves," Michael reflected during a 2010 interview. "I'd like to think she'd be proud of the work I'm doing." The family developed rituals to maintain Catherine's memory and presence in their lives. Ellen kept Catherine's bedroom exactly as she left it, with swimming trophies displayed on shelves and college brochures scattered across her desk. Every March 15th, the family visited Catherine's favorite restaurant and ordered her usual meal, leaving an empty chair at the table. Robert continued making payments into a college savings account he had established for Catherine, eventually donating the accumulated funds to scholarship programs for student athletes. Extended family members struggled with their own grief responses. Catherine's maternal grandmother, Mary Walsh, spent her remaining years organizing prayer groups and vigils for Catherine's safe return. Catherine's paternal uncle, Detective Lieutenant James Hoffman of the Cleveland Police Department, used his law enforcement connections to periodically review the case and pressure St. Augustine authorities to pursue new leads. In 1998, The St. Augustine Police Department conducted its first formal case review, reassigning the investigation to newly hired Detective Maria Santos, who brought fresh perspective and updated investigative techniques. Santos re-interviewed witnesses, examined physical evidence using improved forensic methods, and consulted with FBI profilers to develop new suspect profiles. Despite these efforts, the review produced no significant breakthroughs. A second major review occurred in 2004, coinciding with advances in DNA analysis technology. Cold case specialists from the State Crime Laboratory examined clothing and personal items recovered from Catherine's room, searching for trace evidence that might have been overlooked previously. The analysis revealed several unidentified DNA profiles, but none matched samples from known suspects or individuals in criminal databases. The most promising development occurred during a 2008 review when digital enhancement of security camera footage from a nearby business revealed a partial license plate number from a vehicle parked near Sacred Heart Academy on March 15, 1993. However, Department of Motor Vehicles records from that era had been purged, making identification of the vehicle owner impossible. In 2012, the case received renewed attention when the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit developed a detailed psychological profile of Catherine's likely killer. The profile suggested someone familiar with the school building, capable of moving freely without arousing suspicion, and possessing the emotional control necessary to conceal a crime for extended periods. This profile eliminated several previous suspects while raising new questions about individuals who had been overlooked during the initial investigation. St. Augustine transformed dramatically over the 23 years following Catherine's disappearance. The manufacturing plant where Robert Hoffman worked closed in 2001, forcing many families to relocate in search of employment. New subdivisions replaced farmland on the town's outskirts, bringing urban refugees seeking small-town safety and values. The population grew to nearly 8,000 residents by 2016, fundamentally altering the community's character and relationships. Sacred Heart Academy adapted to changing demographics and educational requirements, expanding facilities and updating curriculum to remain competitive with public schools. The building's basement underwent several renovations over the years, with contractors apparently unaware of what lay beneath their work sites. Ironically, Catherine's grave remained undisturbed through multiple construction projects until the comprehensive renovation that finally revealed the truth. The community's collective memory of Catherine's case evolved from active concern to historical tragedy, with newer residents largely unaware of the unsolved disappearance that had haunted longtime families. Annual memorial services organized by the Hoffman family gradually attracted smaller crowds as people moved away, or new priorities claimed their attention. What's the weather like where you're watching? Sometimes the seasons change, but for grieving families, every day feels like the same cold winter until answers finally arrive. February 18, 2016, marked the breakthrough investigators had pursued for over 2 decades. Construction worker Tommy Valdez's discovery prompted an immediate response from multiple law enforcement agencies. Within hours of the initial find, the basement excavation site became a carefully controlled crime scene, managed by forensic specialists from the State Bureau of Investigation. Dr. Sarah Chen, the forensic anthropologist, spent 3 days meticulously documenting the remains and surrounding evidence. The preservation was remarkable considering the circumstances, Dr. Chen explained to investigators. The concrete created an anaerobic environment that protected both skeletal remains and certain organic materials from complete decomposition. Her preliminary examination confirmed the remains were consistent with a 15-year-old female who had been deceased for approximately 23 years. The forensic team's most significant discovery was microscopic evidence embedded in Catherine's skull fractures. Advanced analysis revealed traces of brass and copper alloys consistent with religious artifacts, specifically the type of ceremonial objects found in Catholic churches and schools. This finding, combined with the priest's ring discovered in the grave, provided investigators with their first concrete evidence linking Catherine's death to Sacred Heart Academy's religious leadership. Modern DNA extraction techniques unavailable during the 1990s, allowed forensic scientists to recover genetic material from bone marrow and tooth pulp. The DNA profile confirmed Catherine's identity and revealed traces of an unknown male contributor, presumably her killer. When compared against expanded criminal databases and genealogical records, the profile yielded a match that shocked investigators and the community alike. Father Thomas McKenna, the respected priest who had served as Sacred Heart Academy's principal during Catherine's disappearance, became the prime suspect when his DNA matched evidence recovered from the crime scene. McKenna, now 74 and serving at a parish in Arizona, had maintained an unblemished reputation throughout his decades of religious service. His connection to physical evidence found with Catherine's remains contradicted everything the community believed about their former spiritual leader. Church records revealed that McKenna had been quietly transferred from St. Augustine to Arizona in August 1993, just 5 months after Catherine's disappearance. Diocesan officials claimed the transfer was routine, part of normal clergy rotation policies. However, investigators discovered internal correspondence suggesting church leadership had concerns about McKenna's behavior and judgment, though no specific allegations were documented. Detective Santos traveled to Arizona to interview McKenna, finding a frail elderly man suffering from early-stage dementia. Initially cooperative, McKenna claimed no specific memories of Catherine Hoffman or the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. However, when confronted with forensic evidence linking him to the crime scene, McKenna's demeanor changed dramatically. "I've carried this burden for 23 years, he finally admitted. God knows what happened in that basement, and now you do too. The arrest of Father Thomas McKenna on February 25, 2016, sent shockwaves through both St. Augustine and the broader Catholic community. Local news crews descended on the quiet town, transforming the Sacred Heart Academy parking lot into a media circus. Longtime parishioners struggled to reconcile their memories of a dedicated priest with the horrific allegations against him. Margaret Kowalski, whose daughter had been in Catherine's class, expressed the community's collective disbelief. "Father McKenna baptized my children, performed my mother's funeral, and counseled our family through difficult times. How could someone who brought so much spiritual comfort be capable of such evil?" Similar sentiments echoed throughout St. Augustine, as residents questioned their judgment and wondered what other secrets might be hidden within trusted institutions. The investigation into McKenna's background revealed a pattern of behavior that had been overlooked or deliberately concealed for decades. Former students from McKenna's previous assignments came forward with allegations of inappropriate conduct, financial impropriety, and abuse of authority. While none of these allegations involved violence, they painted a picture of a man who exploited his position of trust for personal gratification. Most disturbing was evidence suggesting McKenna had maintained contact with Catherine's family throughout the years following her disappearance. Christmas cards, sympathy notes, and occasional phone calls demonstrated his willingness to manipulate grieving parents while concealing his role in their daughter's death. Robert Hoffman recalled receiving a particularly cruel condolence letter from McKenna in 1995. "Father McKenna wrote that Catherine was in God's hands now and that we should find peace, knowing she was safe. Reading those words now makes me physically ill." What theories did you develop while listening to this case? Share your thoughts in the comments about the warning signs communities should recognize. McKenna's trial began on September 12, 2016, in the county courthouse 20 miles from St. Augustine. Prosecutor Jennifer Martinez presented overwhelming forensic evidence linking McKenna to Catherine's murder, including DNA analysis, the priest's ring found in the grave, and financial records suggesting Catherine had discovered McKenna's embezzlement of school funds. The prosecution argued that Catherine's history project had uncovered evidence of McKenna's theft of tuition money and donations intended for school improvements. When Catherine confronted McKenna with her findings on March 15, 1993, he struck her with a brass ceremonial cross in a moment of panic and rage. Realizing Catherine was dead, McKenna enlisted the help of complicit administrators to dispose of her body and fabricate a cover story. Defense attorney Michael Rodriguez portrayed McKenna as a confused elderly man suffering from dementia, whose confession was unreliable. Rodriguez argued that the physical evidence was circumstantial and that other suspects had never been adequately investigated. However, the defense strategy collapsed when additional DNA evidence linked McKenna to other unsolved cases in communities where he had previously served. The most powerful testimony came from Catherine's family members, who described decades of anguish and false hope, while their daughter's killer consoled them and participated in memorial services. Ellen Hoffman's victim impact statement reduced the courtroom to tears. Father McKenna stole more than Catherine's life. He stole our faith, our trust, and our ability to find peace. Every prayer he led for Catherine's safe return was a mockery of our suffering. On November 8, 2016, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict on charges of second-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. Judge Patricia Williams sentenced McKenna to life in prison without possibility of parole, stating, "Your betrayal of trust and decades of deception represent the worst aspects of institutional abuse. This community will never fully recover from the damage you have caused." Catherine Hoffman's case fundamentally changed how missing person investigations are conducted in small communities throughout Ohio. The St. Augustine Police Department implemented new protocols requiring immediate consultation with state authorities when children disappear under suspicious circumstances. Training programs now emphasize the importance of investigating trusted community figures, including religious leaders, with the same scrutiny applied to other suspects. The Catholic Diocese of Cleveland established a victim compensation fund and implemented enhanced background screening procedures for all clergy and lay employees working with children. Sacred Heart Academy was permanently closed in 2017, with students transferred to other schools in the region. The building was demolished, and the land was converted into a memorial park honoring Catherine's memory and supporting families affected by violent crime. Ellen Hoffman died in her sleep on March 15, 2018, exactly 25 years after Catherine's disappearance. Family members believe she held on long enough to see McKenna convicted, but could finally rest once justice was achieved. Robert Hoffman continued operating the Catherine Hoffman Foundation until his death from cancer in 2020. Michael Hoffman now serves as the foundation's director, expanding its mission to include education about institutional abuse and cover-up prevention. The case inspired legislation requiring religious organizations to report suspected criminal activity to law enforcement, rather than handling such matters internally. The Catherine Hoffman Act, signed into law in 2017, eliminates religious privilege exceptions in cases involving suspected child abuse or murder. Perhaps most importantly, Catherine's story serves as a reminder that evil often hides behind facades of respectability and trust. Communities must remain vigilant, questioning authority figures and institutions when circumstances seem suspicious. The price of blind faith can be measured in young lives lost and families destroyed by those who exploit society's most sacred bonds. If this case has impacted you, please subscribe to our channel for more investigations into crimes that expose institutional failures and cover-ups. Share this video to honor Catherine's memory and help other families find the closure they deserve. What aspects of this case do you think could have been handled differently? Your comments and insights help us all understand how communities can better protect their most vulnerable members from those who abuse positions of trust and authority.